got a great tone to play, you know.
Hello?
Have you ever snogged a lady?
We had a technical problem.
Are we on?
Yeah, we're on there.
Can I swear? Shit!
Welcome to Crunch and Roll. My name is John Fox, known to some as Foxy, done breakfast shows across the UK, and more recently some work for the BBC. And here we go again then. Our chat with Stephanie Hirst, understandably, went on longer than any of us were expecting. In fact, producer Simon's fiance's birthday lunch turned into a birthday dinner because we were enjoying our chat so much. And of course, that went down really well. So if you haven't listened to part 1 yet, go and do that now. And if you are fully up to date, then please enjoy part 2. Again, strong language, adult themes, but let's crunch and roll. Oh yeah. So welcome back, Stephanie Hirst.
I can't believe you've made this into 2 parts. Genuinely. I can't believe I'm taking up another hour of the internet. Is there enough internet to go around?
There is. Look, we've done part 1, which you're listening right now. You can listen back to on your favourite podcast provider, Stephanie Hirst part 1. But this is Stephanie Hirst part 2. And we did this because we've heard in part 1 of how you got into radio. It is a pure love for radio. I think you and maybe only a handful of people have got that much love for the industry, which is just incredible. But we heard about you being at Radio Air, Minster FM, The Pulse, and then Hallam, and then went on to breakfast at the Pulse. And the way we left it was that for whatever reasons, you then get the opportunity to go to Viking FM, which was, of course, the station where I first met you. It was my hometown station. And you take over from JK and Joel. And I've got to say, because I was at the station when this happened, and there was great sadness that Jason and Joel were leaving for many reasons. They are absolutely crazy guys to be around, trust me. But, on breakfast at Viking, they were just huge. They were brilliant. And I know as a team, we were gutted that they were leaving. And then it was announced in the station meeting that Hirsty was coming.
Hello.
And there you are. So did you ever want to be at a Viking? It was another Yorkshire station, wasn't it?
Yeah, I've always had a thing for radio station phone numbers, which dates back to 0532 455 362. I've always liked the Viking phone number 01482 226222. I think I was telling Alec Feldman at Hits about this the other day. Who's an amazing talent. Watch out for him. He's so good. Alec Feldman. Not Alex. Alec. So good. And I was talking to him about phone numbers. And I just loved it at Viking I think it's still got the same phone number. Because I was in the Viking studio recently and I saw the phone box and it said 01482 226 222. So on my own, I just walked out the studio going 01482 226 222. I am that sad. Yes. Viking, I always knew that Viking's transmitter at High Hunsley was huge. It got out all over Yorkshire. Radio Air, you could barely pick it up in the car park. I remember Real Radio Yorkshire, where it used to be based at Tingley. It was directly opposite Radio Air's transmitter, which they called the Tingley Twig and used to use it for target practice. You couldn't pick Radio Air up in West Yorkshire, to be honest. I think that's one of the reasons why Air just never really did so well. And lots of format changes. Oh, there's a whole podcast in Radio Air and how it could have been so good. And it did have some amazing talent there, Simon Logan and people like that in the 90s and noughties. And but Viking was just this huge behemoth of a station. I remember hearing Harriet, who's a good friend now, of course, does Breakfast on Magic. I remember hearing Harriet back in the day. Who used to do Late Night Love? Paul Hogan.
Paul Hogan, yes.
Yeah, he was just a huge station. Huge. It always sounded massive. And then my fake cousin, Cameron, did evenings, of course. Then did breakfast, and I don't think it worked. I don't know what happened there, but it didn't work out for whatever reason. But yeah, Viking was on there. I always wanted to work at Viking. And I had family in Hull as well. So I always used to go to Hull. I quite like the white telephone boxes. I
remember, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember the first day that you turned up to do your first breakfast show.
Oh, gosh.
And I'm pretty sure you walked into the studio carrying was it a cymbal from a drum kit? Oh, no. She's still got it. She's still got it.
Hello, Foxy. So I went to Fox's Music in Leeds, and they had a load of splash cymbals, of course, for drum kits. And as I mentioned in part one, that I was studying comedy, and there's a certain sound of a splash cymbal, you know, when there's a budum. And that's the tone. That's the correct tonality. I remember going through every single one, just telling a really bad joke to the salesperson, going, no, that's not it. No, that's it. No. Yes, that's it. There's the cymbal.
Yes, that has brought back just that little instrument there has brought back so many happy memories my year was made.
But I used to hear everyone else using it on the station. I was like, come on, get more cymbals on the air for gags. Usually someone would have that on a Dallet file or a cartridge or something, but no, I literally bang the cymbal. There you go. Oh yeah, and I insisted on having echo in the studio as well. There's always got to be echo in the studio. Cymbal, echo. There you go. Sorry.
My other memory of when you started was, I can't remember what show, I think I was doing weekend overnights, I can't remember. And the gaffer said to me, Stuart said to me, listen, Hirsty's starting, she's got a fascination with Back to the Future. And I had to report your travel from a DeLorean.
You did.
Which was, we brought in a guy who brought this DeLorean. It was incredible. Had your face on the front with Darren Leatham, your producer, and Kirsty Moore, your newsreader, lovely Kirsty. And I remember being quite nervous and also quite excited to do this travel update. And the problem was that the DeLorean was made of pure steel. You couldn't get a phone signal. So I was sat in the car and I couldn't report back.
Honestly, it was a pig to drive as well. So they said to me, what do you want to kind of, have you any ideas of what, you want to market the station? Let's get a DeLorean. Because you don't see them. Let's get a Back to the Future DeLorean. So we got this DeLorean, and it was all logoed up with Hirsty's Morning Glory all over it and everything like that, which was the show name. And yeah, I remember you doing the travel news in it. But it got us recognised. It got, when you're taking over a big show like JK and Joel, and I don't remember feeling particularly nervous about taking over from them, but I knew how big that show was. And I'm sure Joel has mentioned on how they came together is the fact that Joel was late for Drive. So he was always late for Drive because he'd be in the pub. So Andrew Robson put them on breakfast to compliment JK and for him just to read the travel. But he also had to do Drive as well, just to keep Joel out of the pub. But I knew how big that show was, and I knew that taking over it, you've got to make an impact with the audience, and you've got to get out there and you've got to meet the audience. I know lots of broadcasters who like the studio and that's it, and they don't like to go out, they don't like to do gigs. And for me, it works on so many different levels. It's the 24-hour breakfast show. If you're doing this show, you have to live it, and you've got to live it morning, noon, and night. So whether that's doing the show in the morning, doing an appearance during the day or whatever, or doing gigs at night, it's the 24-hour breakfast show. And we did the 24. We did what was the longest breakfast show for 100 hours or something like that.
Oh, do you know what? I do remember admiring you as a team because my dream was obviously always to be on breakfast on Viking, and it was great to see JK and Joel and how I used to sit around and wait to watch them, in the studio, and then yourself, and then of course Danny Oakes, Pimp Daddy Dog, turned up, and Kirsty was there, and Darren Leatham, your producer. You had a great team, an amazing team, and it was a brilliant show. And what you said there, I do remember you were always out. I mean, you were DJing nightclubs pretty much every night.
Yeah, every night. This is when I start to hear you, because you were doing lates. Yeah. And then I'd hear you and I'd go, and I was your biggest, and this is not the Mutual Appreciation Society here, but I remember hearing it, and I remember always telling you, you are phenomenal. You are absolute. It was a kabaddi thing you used to do.
No, Kabaddi was one thing. Foxy's Kebab Shop of the Night was my
Fox's Kebab Shop of the Night.
Most successful feature on overnights, but I got really fat because I was just blagging kebabs.
But I just remember, honestly, right, so pretend he's not here, okay? I just remember hearing him. And you know when you hear that person on the radio, you go, they've got it, they get it. They understand the medium of radio. They understand how to connect with the audience. They're talking like a real person at you. And that's when I heard him.
Bless you.
Absolutely phenomenal broadcaster. Phenomenal.
Being kind,
and you and Tom, complimenting each other.
Yeah.
Was, you got two guys together. Obviously, JK and Joel had been together, but you were different. There was a different dynamic where it wasn't just we're trying to recreate JK and Joel Mark II here. It wasn't that at all. Because you were two complete. You were a local Hull lad, and you got Tom, who's a proper, Cockney geezer, and honestly, it worked brilliantly. And then we had at Viking. You wouldn't get this now. You just wouldn't. It's like at Hallam very quickly. Daryl did an X-rated breakfast show on a weekend, which was just filth, absolute filth, which would then happen to be networked across all of the EMAP stations. But on Viking, the wonderful Gail Lofthouse, who does mid-mornings on Radio Leeds now, she used to do a show sponsored by Ann Summers called Sex and Chocolate. It won a Sony Award. Pushing. Viking was always seen as the kind of, training ground for the bigger EMAP stations, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was absolutely.
Loved it. Honestly, there's a real magic about, well, that was in Studio 2, to be honest, but there was a real magic about the place.
Do you know what? You also took on the baton from JK and Joel to do the pub crawls. Do you remember the pub crawls that you used to do? I mean, I genuinely think that the pub crawls, because we took that baton on as well, and I think that the three breakfast shows together, I think we saved some boozers, because, I remember yours, like, they were absolutely, it was like New Year's Eve on a cold February Tuesday night. You'd go from a one pub to another in a certain area of the TSA, and you'd let the listeners know where you were going to be, and it was absolutely rammed, wasn't it?
So we had this, and we took this to Galaxy. We always, if you do, saying that in Hull, it always worked actually, but when we got to Galaxy, and it's the biggest commercial radio station outside London, and you've got all of these big areas, big cities. If you did something in the city, it would never work. I always believed big splash, little town. So Barton on Humber, pub crawl, shut Barton on Humber down, Goole pub crawl. My God, it was literally, you got police vans and police on horseback and all sorts. Literally everyone came out, every listener. And we're pouring literally bottles of Mad Dog 2020 down listeners' necks. And you're like, there's a picture of me pouring with the pouring spout that they stick on the top of bottles? Pouring with a pouring shot spout down a listener's neck. We had Hirsty's Morning Glory flyers for the Fez Club that were modelled out of male genitalia. And it was all to do with shots and how many shots you can take. And you're like... It was just it, but it was the early noughties, and you could get away with doing. I am in this work society that we live in now. I'm not advocating it, but we push the boundaries, and that's what it was all about for me. It was just pushing things a little further.
I fully accept that times have changed, but God, I miss those days.
Yeah, I do. But I'm a person that's all about evolution, and you've got to evolve. We've got to move on. I'm never going to be one of these people that goes, oh, it was better in my day.
All right. Now we've talked about Viking. Let's move on to the big one. You've already mentioned it. The biggest commercial radio station outside of London. You moved from Viking to Galaxy to create Hirsty's Daily Dose on Galaxy, which was... It pains me to say, because, and I mentioned it before on part one, that we became enemies, which is not strictly true. We've always been friends, but obviously you become competition. But, it was kind of, I don't know, we were then offered your breakfast show, which was an amazing opportunity for us, but then we were up against you on this beast of a station, Galaxy. I mean... Let's not talk too much about the process of you moving from Viking to Galaxy. It was upsetting for some and exciting for others. The only story I'd like to share is that the time that we still, it had been announced that you were going to Galaxy. We were all gutted as a team that you were leaving, not just because you did a great show, but also because you were just a lovely person. But I'll never forget the awkward train journey down to the EMAPs in London.
Oh gosh.
When you and Danny just couldn't look anybody in the eye because you were just a nice person. I know that you felt bad.
Well, there was a whole thing about I was staying, I was going, then I was staying, then I was going again. And it was just look, for anyone that's listened to this and works in the world of radio, sometimes, you know, there's the backroom stuff when it comes to contracts and finer details, and you know, they desperately wanted to keep us, and that was really flattering. But then there became this bidding war, and it all got very, very unpleasantly messy. And I learned a lot then about the contractual side of, and I've always been interested in business and all sorts of stuff like that. But I started to understand more about, you know, the paperwork side of the business and all. And it was just difficult, and I felt so bad. And that train journey down, particularly, we all ended up in Kiss, didn't we?
Well, no, let's just talk about the train journey before we get on to Kiss, because I remember you and Danny, who, you know, me and Danny were good friends when he was at Viking, and it became awkward. And you two sat there, and I'd never seen either of you read a book. But you sat on the train trying to keep yourself away from everybody else by reading the book. And it was either you or Danny whose book was upside down.
Yeah, probably Danny, actually. He'd probably do that on purpose because it's funny that.
But then, look, then we went to Kiss, and the whole Viking team were treated like absolute gold. So thank you for that, because we were given exclusive access to the Kiss studios. We had EMAP put on a lunch for us all as well. It was all thanks to you. So thank you.
Tim Schoonmaker came in, and
Spoonbender, whatever he's called.
Yeah, he came in and did a big announce. Oh gosh, yeah. And then a week later we were leaving again.
All right,
it was all a bit of a mess, and it was all a bit of a, you know, a tug of war situation, because I got a call. I used to have a flat with Danny on the Timber Dock in Hull, on Vicky Dock.
Victoria Dock.
Timber Dock was a pub, wasn't it? It was. I used to stay there once, twice a week. I'd had a nap in the afternoon because I was working at the Fez Club, which was a club in Hull. My Nokia rang, a withheld number, and they'd left a message saying, "Hey Hirsty, it's Andrew, just giving you a call. I'll try you again." And he sounded Australian. I was like, I don't know an Andrew who sounds Australian. He's actually from New Zealand. And I was like, who's it? Danny, have a listen to this. Have a listen to this. None of us could work out who this Andrew guy was. No idea. And then went and did the gig and forgot about it. And then a week later, they ring again. And I actually pick it up this time. And it's a guy called Andrew Jeffries who's calling on behalf of Chrysalis Radio. Andrew ends up being one of the biggest players at iHeartRadio in LA for a number of years. He's just moved back home to New Zealand, actually. But what a guy. And when I was out in LA for quite a bit, I went to see him at iHeart there. Not for a job, but he just gave us a tour, and me and Moyles hung out in LA, and we had a bit of a geek off. And but anyway, Andrew said, just fancy meeting you. I'm just, I'm new to Yorkshire. I just want to kind of meet the people. And I think Griffo met with him, and I think he met quite a few people. But we met again and again and again. And he said, look, there's a breakfast show coming up for grabs within Chrysalis Radio, and they've asked me to kind of do some talent scouting. Now, we'd won a Sony Award for breakfast. We didn't get a gold, but I think it was silver or bronze or whatever. We got it's a win, and your name ends up being on a list, and people see that, and it's a bit of recognition and go, who's that? I'm going to check them out. So I think Andrew had heard of us because of that and listened around. Anyway, eventually he said to me that the breakfast show at Galaxy 105 is coming up. Now, I knew that Anthony and JoJo were doing that show and had done. JoJo had been there and still is there on Capital Yorkshire. She's been there since station launch, February the 14th, 1997, and she's still there. Anthony, I think Bam Bam had started. You got to get Bam on. Anthony had ended up with the breakfast show after Bam Bam had left, because Anthony, I think, was the newsreader to start with. And they'd been on for 5 years and it was doing okay. But I think in East Yorkshire, I think it was like 7th in the marketplace or something. Anyway, they needed to make some real changes. It was seen upon as a Leeds-based radio station. Very Leeds-centric, but it covered the whole of Yorkshire. So huge potential. Dance music explosion, noughties. And we're in 2003 at this point. Anyway, so he offers me it and I'm like, oh my gosh. So literally I said, yes. So I obviously had to go and tell Viking, and that's when the tug of war struggle happened, and that's when it all started to get messy. But eventually I did decide that, okay, we're going to go to Galaxy. I've done 2 years at Viking, and traditionally throughout my career, I'd done 2 years at places. So that was my kind of, right, I've done 2 years here. This has worked. Massive success. Won some awards. Great. Next. So it was on to Galaxy. And then from day one, it just hit the road. And we did a lot of guerrilla marketing in Hull. And
do you know what? I've written it down here. I remember, because I then got my dream job at Viking to present breakfast. Sorry. And then, I waved you off with big smiles. Bye, Stephanie. Bye, Danny. Have a lovely time in Leeds. And then I think that it was the first week of us starting breakfast. EMAP, they put their hands in the pocket and gave us a breakfast budget, and we got pens and we got mugs with our names.
We got billboards.
You got freaking billboards, and the idea was great. So there was you, JoJo, and Danny, and you were tied up with rope, and it said, "We've stolen," something on the lines of, "We've stolen Hull's." Yeah, we've stolen
Hull's biggest breakfast show. Was that opposite the McDonald's? It was a double billboard. There was a double billboard. I was on one side. It said Hull's favourite breakfast show, and I'm tied up, and literally pulling me across the second 48 sheet is Danny and JoJo pulling me across. We've stolen
I had to drive past that every morning to see. I was like, oh,
sorry.
But you did some amazing things. Some of the guerrilla marketing was you were just everywhere in Hull.
That was the marketing team at Galaxy. Rachel McCallie and Jimmy Endicott, and David Lloyd was the MD, of course, and Andrew Jeffries actually didn't stick. He wasn't around. He ended up going to EMAP. He ended up going to KISS and leaving Chrysalis, and the amazing, wonderful genius that is Mike Cass came in to program Galaxy 105, and wow, what a man. What just wonderful in every sense of the word. Do you know, I talked about management earlier and how, look, a program director can get the best out of you or the worst out of you, and Mike just knew how to get the best out of you and nurture. He could be really tearing strips off you in a meeting and really giving you what for, that this, you can't do this, you can't do that, and really going for it. And you've done wrong, or you've misjudged something. Now, usually you'd get a bollocking and you'd leave the office and you'd be like sullen, and you're just a bit like, oh gosh. Mike would leave you feeling the greatest broadcaster on planet Earth, and then give you a Mike hug. And he was just amazing. So and still is, and is the program director of Virgin, and Chris Evans' boss, and Graham Norton's, and just, what an amazing guy. So we were lucky to have a team at Galaxy. And when you walked in, I just remember walking into Joe's as well, where Galaxy was based, and the office was just, there was vinyl 12-inch singles piled high, and Alex Pepper at the end of the studio pointing a laser gun saying it's gold plated, it cost me 700 quid. I'm like, what? So I was like, wow, what an amazing, So it was definitely the right thing to do at the time, career progression wise. But I was really upset that how it ended at Viking a bit.
Yeah, but you ended up earning shitloads more money, Steph. And,
not that much more. Genuinely, not that much more.
Cunty.
We apologise, sir.
We just play records till 8, 9. When do we finish?
I'm not drunk. I've had a couple of drinks. I'm not drunk.
Do you know, I always wondered, so when you were at Galaxy, how much freedom did you get?
Complete freedom.
Complete freedom.
Complete freedom.
Yeah.
And like I said, with Mike, complete guidance and belief in you and everything. And with David Lloyd, who was the first MD, just they believed in this product. And even down, I remember we did the rooftop tour. So we did the show from rooftops all around Yorkshire. And one week, say for instance, we did the rooftop in Leeds on the top of Majestic's nightclub, which is now where Channel 4 is based, opposite the Queen's Hotel. So then we'd run over, get the train to London, do awards ceremony or whatever. Next day we got up and did the show from Chrysalis Radio's headquarters in London on Bramley Road. And then you've got, all of the Richard Huntingford and Phil Riley and all of the big, Chris Wright, the owner, wasn't there, but you got all of the massive bigwigs stood watching you doing the show. And they start to, obviously, they've heard the show, they buy into the product. And Chrysalis, for anyone listening to this who worked for Chrysalis Radio, wow, that place was a family. It was all about caring and making the best radio. I'm sure it was all about making, they wanted to make some money as well, but radio and their employees very much came first. And you felt loved, cherished and valued at Chrysalis.
I asked a question about freedom because I know you're really good friends with Moyles, but I always wondered if Moyles, like yourself, and you mentioned freedom there, was given the freedom just to do, or did someone just believe in what he wanted to do? And was it the same for you? Just go off and do your thing and we won't bother with it. And because there's a lot of management would tinker with shows and it would kill it.
Management goes through periods where they do tinker with things, and we did have periods where, but there was one time where we all had to meet in the Malmaison Hotel, and we got a dressing down each for some reason. I can't remember what had happened, but the show started really strong, and then you've got 3 different individuals. So just breaking this down for a second, you've got me, of course. But then you've got JoJo, who's been there since 1997. And these 2 of the people have come into this show that's, it's her show. And I've come in, retitled it, and brought this guy, Danny, with me. Now, Danny has not been himself on the air because he was playing a character on Viking that we alluded to earlier, Pimp Daddy Dog. So Danny is from Barnsley. And I'd known Danny since he was, I don't know, 15 or something. I was doing DJing, doing under 18s night at a club in Barnsley called Hedonism. And he came up with little baby dreadlocks and went, I can rap. And said, have you got Cypress Hill Insane in the Brain? And he just looked cool. He had this big long leather Matrix jacket on. This is before the Matrix. And he just looked cool. Anyway, I put Insane in the Brain on and he just rapped word perfect. And he was I used to get up every week and you get 250 kids in a nightclub in Barnsley going crazy, all under 18, going crazy for Danny. So I knew Danny from then, and then he started doing stand-up stuff. And Bachelor's Cup of Soup sponsored these local comedy night heats at Yates's Wine Lodges around. There's a brand that you don't see anymore, Yates's Wine Lodge. Anyway, Danny won the local heat, then he won the regional heat, then he won the national heat. And won 10 grand that he said he spent on coke and hookers. So, so Danny was doing comedy, and the first 10 minutes or the first 5 minutes of his set was in an American accent because he looked like he could be from New York. Anyway, he'd mastered an American accent so much, he did 5 minutes of comedy and went, oh, I don't really talk like that. I'm from Barnsley. So we created this character called Pimp Daddy Dog at Viking. And Danny played Pimp and became massively famous in Hull as Pimp.
He never snapped out of character.
Never.
I remember he came to my mum's house in North Hull for some tea. And I went, this is his real name's Danny. And I thought he's just going to come out with Barnsley. He didn't. He played Pimp Daddy Dog in front of me mum for about an hour and a half.
So Danny was playing this character called Pimp. We get to Galaxy. Danny's got to be Danny. Because he was tired of the pimp character. He had to put a voice on. So he's like, I've got to be me. And he was trying to find himself. So the one thing we did do is role definitions in working out, each other's character, what makes each of us tick. I remember spending a long time in boardroom over, having consultants come in. Jim Hicks, who worked at Chrysalis, really helped us. We had some really good consultants coming in as well. They just helped us find our way a little bit. And, with all consultants, you can take them with a pinch of salt. But actually, there's some out there which are, really absolutely worth their weight in gold. People like Francis Curry and people like that who just get it, understand it. So we did a lot of that, and that helped us understand, what made each other's tick. So I would be on the air, and 6 till 7 was always called the warm-up hour. We'll be all right after 7, marginally better after 9, but don't expect too much. So 6 o'clock was always the warm-up hour. So we'd be reading the papers in the studio, and I'd see something in the Daily Mirror, page 17, that I know that Danny would lose his shit over that. Right, okay, place to one side. Just write down on page 17. Right, great, 8:10. Great, do that then. And this is like at 6:40 I've spotted this story. But I've got my 8:10 because I've seen it in the paper. So anyway, then I just, at 8:10, because we never rehearsed anything. We never went through anything and said, right, you say this, I'll say that, I'll say this is it, and this is the out. Great, good, right, let's do it. Bosh. Never did that. Just opened up the mic, see what happened, because we were so confident in our characters. Yeah. You could just say one thing could happen at the start of a link. And I remember there was one show that we could share screens in the studio, and I ended up on JoJo's screen. Anyway, I'm on air, I'm reading whatever, I'm doing something, and then I see a calendar alert come up on JoJo's computer, and it said, remember to book tomorrow off for coil fitting. So I start what I was saying, have you got to book a day off because you're having a coil fitted? Like with that 8:10 link that I would have seen in the Daily Mirror, Danny would lose his shit, and that would be an amazing breakfast show promo for that day. So things were just really organic. So we were really confident in ourselves that we could just do this, and it made a connection with the listener, But there were so many things that we did that you just think, gosh, could you do that on the radio now? No, you couldn't. We live in a different world.
It's a shame.
It is a shame, but things have changed for good reason.
Yes, yeah, okay.
For good reason. You've
laboured that point a couple of times, Steph. That's fine. Look, and at the time of recording, it was the weekend just gone. The whole team from the Dose got back together to celebrate the 20th anniversary.
Yeah.
Does it feel? It makes me feel old. How does that make you feel? 20 years.
It just feels like, gosh, it feels like 2 minutes ago that we started that show. So I put this photo of me, Danny and JoJo. Now, me and Danny, we left the show and we famously didn't speak for a long time. So we met up last Wednesday for the first time in 9 years and sat and talked, and it was brilliant for 3.5 hours. And it was just wonderful. It was like no time had passed at all. And I think sometimes if you've worked on a show and it's a very high pressured show, and you can work with people sometimes that I think you do your own heads in. And I think me and Danny sat in a studio with each other for 15 years because he was on Viking and then on Galaxy Capital. We just did each other's heads. So I didn't ring him after the show was finished. He didn't ring me. We just ended up not speaking. And that's a shame that happened. But it's fixed now and it's all right. So we took a photo at the night that I put on Facebook, on my Facebook page. And it's had 16.1 thousand likes.
Amazing.
With loads of people on the Facebook page, we're just talking about things that we'd done. And what surprised me was how much the audience remembers stuff. For anyone who's worked in radio, and you're always told by management, aren't you, that listeners always forget. But they don't. You'll have had people coming up, from your time at BR&B and Free or at 210 or whatever. People will stop you in the street and talk to you about certain things or mention certain things on Facebook. You've never played audio on this. Is it a rule that you don't play audio?
I think no. I think Sean Tilley played his Fluff Freeman clip. So if you've got some audio,
he did.
Yeah, feel free. There are no rules.
Bad meets evil. impression of the end of Thriller. Is it all right?
Yeah, it's very
It's
good.
all right. Do you like the door shut at the end?
Yeah. Yeah, very good.
All right, isn't it? First time I've ever done that. I'm impressed myself. Might listen back to that.
He's not even kidding.
I'm not.
No,
I'm not.
Really not.
I very rarely listen back to the shonk that we do, but at varying occasions, I do.
I think I wasn't bad in that bit. That impression wasn't too bad.
I'm going to listen to it over and over again. Tell myself I'm brilliant.
Make a
I put
tape
on
of
the
it.
best of tape.
The best of tape is
Very short.
It's very short.
About 30 seconds long.
Right, what else we got here? Ursi, I'm having a crap day. Any chance of JoJo doing an 0800 big and bouncy to cheer me up from Mike, the white van man? Yep, can deliver with that.
Oh, 800, it's not free phone.
It's
We're charged for it. It's $1.50 a minute. It's 898, thank you.
do you remember 0898 numbers?
0898. I was thinking 0800. That's a free. I know.
How
I
many
guess.
free phone sex lines do you know? Unless it's like a really mucky ex. She rings you. Anyway, sorry, crack on.
Go on.
Oh wait. I'm thinking of 0800. I can't give this away.
We're charging.
Yeah, okay. 0898. Big and bouncy. That'll be 150, please.
Yeah. Even though it wasn't a full minute, you get charged for the full minute as soon as you connect. That's how it works.
And here's Price Tag. Wait.
Yeah.
From Jessie J. Hope that cheers you up. Mike the White Van Man, 919.
That is brilliant. It's
I
so,
just,
do you know what? It's just so nice to hear you all together as well.
no.
It is.
It has been nice to revisit it a little bit, but there's no new single, there's no new album, there's no world tour. It's I think some things are best, left in the past, and we can't. Not that we ever set out to offend. I've never wanted to set out to offend at all, but I like to push the boundaries a little bit. You do hear Miles, and Miles still to this very day, I know he's my best friend, but he pushes the boundaries a little bit. And there are other people that push boundaries just a little bit. I'm guessing in the future, if someone came to me and said, how would you like to do this and a team together? Because I know I am better with a team of people, without doubt. On my own, I'm all right. I'm okay. I can keep the needles wobbling and I'm fine. And there is an art to I'm quite enjoying being a jock again. It's quite nice. But there is part of me when I hear stuff, when you've got the chemistry of a team together, there's a magic in that. There's a real magic to it. And when I knew my time was coming to an end, and I knew that when I had been diagnosed with gender dysphoria and all that kind of stuff, I knew that I had to make a decision. And I used to go in, John, I'd be nipping myself during the link. I'd be smelling the studio. I'd be savouring all of it, because I knew you can't do a daily breakfast show and go through what I had to go through. You can't. I had to stop on my mental health and a couple of failed suicide attempts. I do apologise if any of this is triggering for anybody. But I knew that this was going to stop. And we were at our peak. We were like 1.3, 1.4 million listeners or something. This thing was huge. It was absolutely huge. And I knew I had to stop. But nothing lasts forever. And we had a good run. We had an incredible run. And isn't it better to leave things at its peak? And you can watch a TV show, or remember how big X Factor used to be, how huge it was, or how big Big Brother used to be. I know it's coming back, but when it's been milked to death, you just go, it's not as good as it used to be. No one ever said that about our show, so I'm glad that it's remembered fondly, and I'm glad that it happened. I'm fortunate, honoured, and just that I got to experience that. Wow. Not many people get to do that. Well, just when you get to do a show that is a hit with the audience. Wow. Amazing. And I'm so lucky. Incredibly lucky.
You should be very proud of yourself, and the three of you as a team. And I'm sure there were.
And it wasn't.
People,
it wasn't just us. This is why I got everyone together. It was just me. I was like, look, on the 13th of January, that's when we did our first show in 2003. Let's get a load of people together. So, I reached out to Danny and said, look, I'd love you to come along. I completely understand if you don't want to, but he was here. Yeah. I said, well, let's get together first and have a chat. And we did. And it's been brilliant. Fantastic. And what was weird on last Friday night was, do you know Ant and Dex stand in a particular way? Me, Danny and Jojo, it's always Danny that's to the right of me and Jojo's to the left of me. And what was weird was being stood with those three again. And Jojo always talks when she's having a photo taken. She just gibbering away. I'm going, stop talking. I can't stop talking. And Danny's going, stop talking. We'll get a photo done quicker then. And literally we all fell back into character. I remember telling Jojo this the day after. And when we spoke on the phone briefly and we were chatting away, I said, oh, it's really weird standing in the middle of you and hearing both your voices. She went, well, it weren't for me because you sound completely different. Yeah, that's vocal surgery, love. They cut my vocal folds and made them shorter, so it's higher. Thanks.
It was a technical problem. You heard something on air you shouldn't have done. Oh, yeah.
Some amazing memories from your time at Galaxy Capital. But whilst you're doing that, you also go national, which, we've talked about how you should be proud of Galaxy, and I'm always going to call it Galaxy, because it was an incredible breakfast show, just an incredible breakfast show. But also, and don't get me wrong, that's hard to say when we were in competition for a couple of years. And
I felt really bad that we were,
kicking our ass.
hammering the, Yeah, it was...
You should have sleepless nights about that.
It's all right.
No, I jest. But alongside doing that, you go national, which for you, as that person who dreamt of being on the wireless, you're now national on the chart. How would and because you are Anunnaki, this must have been a dream come true for you, Steph.
It was. So I get the network chart as it was, Pepsi chart or actually Hit 40. We'd just gone from Pepsi to Hit 40 UK. And I'd tech-opped this show when I was a TO at Radio Air. A wonderful guy called Steve Maguire, who was one of the tech ops at Radio Air. I think that was his main job. But if he was off, I would sit in and tech up it. But what I also used to do is listen down the line beforehand because you'd get 10 minutes of Capital.
Really?
And I couldn't hear Capital, being in Barnsley or Leeds. So you get 10 minutes of Capital. And then afterwards, if SMS, Satellite Media Services, didn't disconnect the satellite, you'd get 20 minutes of Fox's Jukebox. So when I came to do the charts, and I got to do it, one of the first things I did was play a load of Capital jingles before we started the show because I just knew there was loads of anoraks like myself listening down the line beforehand. I'd say, hi everyone, hello if you're listening to all the stations, just some Capital jingles. Okay, we go. And I've had people come up to me working radio now going, I used to listen to you down the line playing Capital jingles. I went, yes, and I used to leave them clean on the end. So I didn't seg them all together, so they got clean copies of them. Because I'm a geek, because I just know what other geeks zip. I just knew what other geeks went through. So, but yeah, I got to do a wonderful guy called Pete Simmons at Chrysalis, because Hit 40 UK had become a company by this point, I think. But all of the group program directors had a say within Hit 40 UK, the company. So Pete threw my name in the hat. I think whoever was at Elliot Webb, his name got thrown in the hat. There was a few others. I think Darren Proctor at EMAP at the time got E-Dept for Foxy and stuff. And then I was asked, because Chrysalis Galaxy started taking the chart, which was because we were a dance and R&B radio station. It's strange for us to be taking, playing James Blunt records or anything like that. So I was asked to do a pilot first, and it was at Unique Studios, where that's who produced the chart. And also that's the location for I'm Alan Partridge. So the studios were unique facilities. So I walked in, there was a brass plaque on the door that said Alan Partridge Memorial Suite. So I walked into the studio and there it is. The actual desk, the microphone, the cart machines or whatever, the mini disc machines or whatever that was there, where he would hit the button that said Alan's Hot Bath or whatever. I'm like thinking, I'm going to get to sit behind this desk and no, you sit in the booth where Dave Clifton sits and where you check the small print in your contract. And Dale Winton, God rest his soul, had just been in to record Pick of the Pops. So I go in the studio and they start playing the clips through and everything like that and blah, blah, blah. And you know when you're not pressing your own buttons, it's just not the same, is it? When you're not in control, and it just lacked that slickness. It just didn't. Anyway, I was cleaning the car about 3 weeks later and I heard my amazing friend Elliot Webb doing the chart. And I thought, oh, good on Elliot. Oh, I didn't get it. It's fine. It's all right. I was stupid. I was concentrating on breakfast. It wasn't something, I never even thought I'd get it. So about a month or two later, a guy called Mick Meadows, who I think's at Virgin and he worked at Radio 2 for a bit, producer, called up and said, I heard your pilot. It's not the slickest, is it? I said, no. He says, but you've got it. Yeah, I know you can do it. Do you want to come and do a pilot at Capitol? I went, yeah. Do bear shit in the woods? Of course I want to come and do a pilot at Capitol. Anyway, so went for a Burger King beforehand. Had a Whopper. Went in. Remember walking into Capitol. Terence still on breakfast. Foxy's on drive. It's still the smiley logo. I walk in. I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm in Capitol. So I go up to floor 3. I go into the opposite studio. Foxy's on the air. Foxy buzzes through going, hey, Hirsty. I'm like, where's the talkback button? And Mick goes there. I says, you all right, Foxy? He's like, yeah. He said, come on, you'll be great. I know you'll be great. Come on, you're going to dep for me. I know you are. And I was like, amazing, thank you. He believed in me. And that gave me the confidence. I told Fox this. I saw him just before Christmas at a little radio gathering and we sat in a corner for like an hour, just me and him gassing. And I thanked him, thank you for all the encouragement that he gave me. And, he was really wonderful to me. Because he was doing Pop Idol stuff. Anyway, I did the pilot and Mick said, yeah, right, okay. I think that's okay. We need to play it to the controllers, to all the program directors, the group program directors at the next meeting. But anyway, I got a call about a week later saying, can you do this coming Sunday? I was like, yes.
That was amazing.
So anyway, it went down. I just remember it was in the old, it's where the Capitol studio is now. But I was still in the back old studio with the old Clyde desk. At the side of me, there was an ashtray with Chris Tarrant's 3/4 smoked cigar from Friday's breakfast show that he would spark up on Monday, of course, and finish the rest off. It was a no-smoking building, but it's CT. So I remember getting in there and the microphone was on cables. I remember plugging my headphones in, probably these exact ones I'm wearing now still. I remember plugging them in the desk and then played the first link out and heard myself thinking, oh, that sounds big. 95.8 sounds massive. And then you do your first thing. And when you speak through the mic and the processing and everything, and you could listen off 95 point great at that point. You could hear it. I could hear everything. And genuinely nearly shat myself in excitement. It was the most amazing feeling of sometimes I was a guy called Carl Kingston at Radio Air. He used to play me these California air check videos. So me and Moyles would go around to Carl's house and we'd watch these California air check videos of these DJs in America, like JoJo cooking Kincaid. Have you seen that clip where he's doing it over, which is one of the greatest clips when he's doing over to Cameo and Word Up. And so, and I think there was a guy called, what was he called? George McFly or someone, not from Back to the Future, or Kid Kelly or someone from Z100, was talking about using the desk as an instrument and making the processor work. And I'd learnt this at like 16 years old. So with the gains up, so you've got the track that's playing, slowly turn the gain down or pull the fade down slightly. And on air, that won't That won't make any changes whatsoever because the audio gain control on the Optimod or Omnia or whatever will pull it back up. Your next item, which is a jingle or track or whatever, have that, really loud. And then the sweeper, of course, a little bit louder. And that will smash in and just sound louder. People have always said to me, it just sounds louder when you're on. Because I make the desk work. And I remember sitting at Capitol and just pulling the fader down and seeing how far I could get it down without it disappearing. But what didn't occur to me was all the other radio stations will have had different processing. So on 102.2 Links FM, it probably went off. Sorry. But I was just trying to work out. I was just playing on a massive national show.
An amazing achievement to get that as well.
It was just amazing.
Amazing. And then obviously you're still at Galaxy Capital at this time, a couple of years out, and then let's move on quickly because our time is coming to an end here, Steph. But you go to the BBC, and I know you've done Manchester and you've done Leeds. I remember being, I was at BBC WM in the office, and somebody went, bloody hell. And I went, what? And they went, Stephanie Hirst is doing a show for BBC Leeds in Ibiza. I was like, how has Stephanie got away with that? How did you get, BBC local radio, do not go to Ibiza.
To Cafe Mambo. So I'd obviously left everything happened with me personally and all that kind of stuff. And I took some time out and then got the BBC Manchester show, an incredible woman. I've got to name check Kate Squire, who's at BBC Manchester and basically in charge of the Northwestern now. And I think maybe Northeast, I'm not sure, they've just made some announcements, haven't they? And she gave me a Saturday night show. And vocally, I had to find my place and I had surgery on my voice and all sorts of stuff like that. And that's when they offered me a daily show at BBC Radio Leeds. So I did mid-mornings, 9 till midday. And we saw one day that it was like the 40th anniversary of Club 1830 or something. So we spoke about it that day on the show. And I just made a flippant comment. I said, you know what? We should do the show from Ibiza or something like that. If you went on holiday in the 1980s or a package holiday or something like that, or a Club 1830, chances are you probably went to Ibiza. Club Tropicana was filmed at Pikes. Lewis Capaldi's obviously rip-off video was recently, was based on that. That's at Pikes. That was Freddie Mercury's favourite destination in Ibiza. There's Freddie's room there that you can go in. There's all of these things. There's so many people that are actually in the old town of Ibiza or just on the Isle of Ibiza, on the White Isle. So many people that have, practiced yoga, but there's lots of expats from West Yorkshire. So that was my selling point. Anyway, I mentioned it to my boss and he went, yeah, we can do that. Cost it up. How much will it cost? Anyway, so Radio 1 have got a studio at Cafe Mambo with a full broadcast desk and everything in there. So we found out whether the studio was free one Friday, got the date sorted, and I think it cost us about $1,000 in total or something. So we did it as cheap as possible, stayed in the most budget hotels, and went for one night and did the Friday show from there. And we'd got listeners coming down, but who still listened on BBC Sounds to BBC Radio Leeds, who lived in Ibiza, and they came down and it was chucking it down that day. The whole day, it was absolutely banging it down. So it wasn't sunny in the slightest, but they got a microphone out on the terrace at Cafe Mambo, so I kept putting the rain on the air as well. I'm sorry if you can hear my cat meowing in the background. He's just wanting, Kenny, who's named after Kenny Everett, is wanting some attention. So yeah, so I got to do that. So and for me, that's just pushing some boundaries a little bit.
I understand that part, but only you, Steph, only you would do a BBC local mid-morning show live from Cafe Mambo.
From Ibiza. Why not? Why can't you? Look, if the target audience is 50, right? Yeah. This was in 2019 I did this or something. Now, in my head, if the target audience was 50, the sweet spot was 1988, 89 for music. If you're 50, you were 20 in 1989 or whatever. That was my reference point. Anyway, that was my sweet spot of thinking. But anyway, so after that, I decided that, I've always public spoken. I've always kind of had this little believe, achieve mantra since I was about 15. I wanted to be on Radio Air. I used to say to myself, believe, achieve. I saw these 2 words in a book at school and she believed and she achieved. So I used to say to myself, believe, achieve, and used it as a manifestation. I didn't know what manifestation was, but I used to say it to myself. So, and then career started to happen. I stopped saying it to myself. But when I lost everything, I had to get up off my backside and do something about it. So I started saying believe, achieve again. And then from that, I started doing lots of keynote speaking. And I'd been at BBC Radio Leeds for about 3 years or something. And I was getting more and more bookings when it came to public speaking. So I decided to come off air full time. And I'd been speaking to Bauer about, coming over there. And they said, well, we've got a Hits Radio Pride station, our little pop-up station that's actually, that went on to be full-time. We've got that. Would you like to do your belter show? Because I used to DJ in my kitchen. Yeah. Long before lockdown, I used to do kitchen belters. It'd get like 100,000 views a week, about 30,000 live, and then I'd just leave it on and it'd get like 100,000 across the rest of the week. So we're like, well, come and do an hour of, 90s old school stuff. I said, oh, cool. So I did that, left the BBC, went public speaking full-time, and then they said, do you want to do it on the network? Because the streaming figures for belters on Hits Pride is huge. Do you want to come and do it on the network? I was like, yes, please. That means I'm back on Hallam, Viking, and The Pulse, and all these other stations. And Metro that I went to visit when I was like 17. And Free Radio, and there's so many of them, isn't there? So I do that on a Saturday night, and then they gave me a second show on a Sunday night, which is a throwback, which is all the throwback tunes that we've kind of played during the week. So anything from last year back to like Mark Morrison, Return of the Mac, or Spice Girls or anything like that. I do that 7. So Belters is 10 till 1 on a Saturday, and then Sunday evening 7 till 10. And do you know what? It's enough. And then cover on Greatest Hits. I'm back on Greatest Hits soon. So I just get to do a huge variety of stuff, and it's wonderful. I'm depping for Flair on Hits Breakfast in a couple of weeks as well. So it just it's nice. And that was I did a couple of weeks for Flair last year, and I'd not done breakfast before since the dose. So that was a bit can I still do it? And luckily, yeah, it was all right. It was okay. They were happy. But it's just to wrap this up, aren't we lucky?
We are very lucky, yeah.
Aren't we lucky that we've got to do this job? If it ends tomorrow, gosh, what a ball it's been. Nothing lasts forever. And, I found there is a life outside radio as well. I get to work with so many amazing, huge companies. I was at Lloyd's on the Mound in Edinburgh a few weeks ago. I get to work with so many huge, massive brands. I want to take it into America. I've already taken it into Europe, Believe, Achieve. So, there is, there's so much other stuff you can do in life as well. But radio it's always been my first love. I love it more than anything. I'm just a geek.
As we wrap up our episode 2 with you, Steph, we've reflected Radio Air, Minster, the Pulse, your dream of getting on Hallam, then doing Pulse, Viking, the Hersey's Daily Dose, Galaxy, Morning Glory, everything that you've done, the charts, BBC and more present. I would suggest, looking at your CV, that 25p that you spent to do the Radio Air tour was worthwhile.
It very much was. It very much that decision of there and then going, I am going to work here. And genuinely, this is to anyone that's listening to this right now, whatever you're going through in life, anything is achievable. If you believe it, if you put your mind into a state of belief, anything is possible. It makes you get off your backside and go, I'm going to do this. Use me as an example. If I can grow some tits in public, you can do anything. Do you know, anything is possible. Believe, achieve.
Steph, thank you so much.
Pleasure
for your time.
And congratulations on this amazing, amazing podcast. Do I get to do the end bit?
You do.
I've been looking forward to doing this end bit. I best not cock it up. Right, here we go. You've been listening to Crunch and Roll with me, Stephanie Hirst, even though it says Joel Ross in my script. Subscribe on your favourite podcast app to get a new episode as soon as it drops. And Crunch and Roll is, of course, a 969 media production, presented by John Fox and produced by Simon Bachowski. I think I said it right.